Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The words that repeated themselves throughout Bush 41's funeral mass yesterday: friendship, loyalty, humility. Alan Simpson on the final.
And he was a man of such great humility. Those who travel the high road of humility in Washington, D.C. are not bothered by heavy traffic.
So awesome.
And George W. Bush, of course, giving the final eulogy, a poignant one, but also an entertaining one, picking up where Simpson left off.
He placed great value on a good joke. So I chose Simpson to speak.
That's so true, but everybody cried when George W. Bush broke down and cried.
Finally, every day of his 73 years of marriage, Dad taught us all what it means to be a great husband. He married a sweetheart. He adored her. He laughed and cried with her. He was dedicated to her totally. We're going to miss you. Your decency, sincerity, and kind soul will stay with us forever. So through our tears, let us know the blessings of knowing and loving you, a great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again.
For more on the personal side of Bush 41, we're pleased to be joined by Tom Kasza, who is a former Secret Service agent in the Presidential Protective Division for both Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. He was part of President Bush's security detail for 3 years. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Dan. Good to be here.
So your reflections on your time spent with Bush 41.
Yeah, it's certainly been a reflective week, right? I watched that in detail yesterday, and the same can spout off the same adjectives because they were dead on and don't waver. Just the kind spirit, the determination to bring everybody up around him, and after reflecting on what we heard yesterday, it was unwavering. It wasn't, in this business you see a lot of people in a lot of cities and a lot of countries who are leaders or business people or whatever, and how they are when they're on and how they are behind the scenes. And this, kudos to this man who lived an entire life, and there is nothing but what you see. And it started out with a long resume from businessman to going back to we honor these in this country as we should individually. A war veteran, and in this case, called a war hero, who shot down during World War II, and then rescued and moved on with a successful life. So, pretty incredible. You can go piece by piece, but all of them involve just that calm decency, something to be admired.
What was it like protecting him? Was he, obviously he seems like a kind man, but do you have any stories or anything funny you would want to share with us?
Yeah, so, the first thing I would say, Amy, is the energy. And you have to remember the time. Everything is relative to that moment, right? And we had President Reagan, who people might forget how early he was shot in his presidency, 3 months into his presidency in 81, and at the age of already 70, maybe 70-something. So his presidency was molded by that to a certain degree. I personally believe because there was limited travel. When he went on a trip, it was a very, very organized, thought out trip, whether that be a foreign trip or a domestic trip. They were not numerous by any stretch. So the vice president, 8 years of George Bush, was extensive travel, who also had Secret Service protection so that entire time. So the Secret Service was very used to his travel, but had not seen it at a presidential level. So when he came into the White House, things changed. There was substantial foreign travel, substantial domestic travel regularly, and then to include Camp David on the weekends, and his official home was in Kennebunkport, Maine, so there was a lot of activity up there, boating, golfing, tennis. There was no downtime for this man. It was described yesterday, and accurately described. There was no hour to waste when you could be doing something. So it was it was active.
And in the political arena with media as well as political opponents, he was sometimes, not sometimes, there was an effort to caricature him as out of touch with the common man, as not being relatable to regular people. And I wonder that certainly was addressed straight away by many who provided eulogies and who have provided eulogies all week. But I wonder if you have examples of Trump's interaction, President Bush's interaction with not just world leaders but regular people that would address that characterization.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to political style. It was addressed yesterday, and I can speak personally of having heard him say it. He often repeated what his mother would say, which is "Don't be a braggadocio," if that's the proper terminology, but that's what he would say. And that flies in the face of promoting yourself and being a politician. So I think historians yesterday talked about that, which is, being a quiet leader. I thought he was adored, where you go and on a public level, and then at one point he had a 93% approval rating. So certainly that was the case. Now, let the experts determine why that fell off during the election and where he lost. But I could be wrong, but I believe at one point he may have held the highest presidential polling data at one point. So, I guess it's all a measure of when you're judging. But we made extensive travel in foreign countries, and there was an aura of him, or a gravitas that he had with foreign leaders, at least that I saw. That may have started with the Reagan style, and then maybe a more personal one-on-one style with President Bush that I certainly saw existed.
Then you moved on to guard President Bill Clinton, correct?
Yeah, I worked, that's a moment in history also, right? You're working one day in the White House for President Bush, and the very next day it was President Clinton.
And what was that like?
Well,
I mean, I don't know if you can kiss and tell, but the difference between the two men.
You're speaking through my lens, which is a security lens, obviously. And again, we just went from a style change of a man in his late 70s, maybe 80s, to a late 60s President Bush into his 70s, and down to now I might have been 45 years old with a 12-year-old daughter.
Right.
A group that had a very large family, President Bush, a lot of children and grandchildren, to really the three of them, and not active in Camp David on the weekends, other trips or local dinners. So from our standpoint, it was about adapting to the new style of how your schedule is. So from a security standpoint, the rest of it, I'll let other people document.
Going back to Bush 41, the relationship between President Bush and Barbara Bush is much discussed. What you saw with the interaction of the husband and wife, as husband and wife, but also as president and as first lady.
Yeah, it was. Listen, I think somebody said 73 years of marriage. That's so far from the standard of 50 years, which we give true credit for. And it's just that same loving. It was always bar, and I watched her. I spent some time up close with her, traveling during the campaign. She campaigned aggressively for him in '92. We know how that ended, but you listen to her tell his story, and they had a dynamic story, leaving the wealthy East Coast and moving into a townhouse and starting in Odessa, Texas. So, and then supporting him through the years. But I know for a fact, having watched it, it's about as genuine gets. And then that continued, obviously, all the way up to watching her pass before him.
What was the relationship like during their time in the White House with the kids who went on to their own political careers, W and Jeb, of course? Just in terms of, did you sense that they were mentoring their children for life in public service, to have political careers, that they had any sense of the Bush family as a political dynasty, or that they sort of rebuffed that idea as H.W. Did in an interview with Larry King in '99.
Yeah, from my viewpoint, which is, not paying close attention to that, but just as an observer of who comes and goes, I don't think I could find people in my sphere that would say, oh, they're grooming him or they're training him or how you just referred to it. Quite the opposite. That, White House is there's about 3,000 employees on all the ground. It's very busy, and you would not see many of them. They might come by on the weekend and you might see them at Camp David, and you'd certainly see them at the family events, but I never got the impression, I don't think there was anything that would lead anybody to think, okay, here's the down-the-road plan that no one is seeing. I never saw any of that. I think, with Jeb being the governor, there was a lot of political speculation just in the media, but as far as grooming or the terms you use, no. I think this came on late in the plan when W became governor of Texas, and then it moved forward.
What point of the service yesterday did you will you hold near to your heart, or was it the final lines from George W. Bush, or was it something else, or was it all of it?
Yeah, it was all. I thought it was really, really well done. I did some commenting on it, watching it with a news crew and political analysts, and listening to their viewpoints. But from mine, well planned. It's in this case, the president plans his own funeral for the most part. I got a kick out of the quip he said to Meacham. I believe Meacham read him his eulogy before he died, and the president said, "That's an awful lot about me, don't you think?" I think that's right down to the end. I will notice a couple things that I think I talked about yesterday, which were the president was renowned for writing letters, little hand cards, little notes, old school, and they would come to anybody. It could come to a 30-year worker in the White House, a politician, somebody in the staff, but frequently to Secret Service, and frequently after like a long trip, an 11-day swing through Europe or Asia, or things that involve a lot of logistics and difficult times that he may have seen. And it was motivating because it's not anything that anybody necessarily deserves, expects. It was just literally a note of thanks. But that starts at the top. When the person at the top acts a certain way, it's very difficult for his underlings, whether that be press, staff, agents, all the people that are out there representing him, to act differently. So I thought that was always special. You'd walk in our center, and it'd be pinned to the wall, and it was just a handwritten note. So he named agents as his honorary pallbearers from the funeral home to the airport in Houston. And I thought, he knows exactly what he's doing. That's his last handwritten note, the equivalent of his last handwritten note. That's a thank you. He also did it for a second group that was from his military carrier group, to some admirals and retired admirals that he must have known.
Yeah.
I noticed that, and then the speeches and eulogies. I thought they were very good. Listen, I think you can sit and these are long days and long ceremonies, and most people catch parts. I watched the entire thing. I thought it was really well done.
Nice touches, too, where you're talking about the pallbearers and all that, right down to those details and those last thank yous. I think it's a good way to characterize it. He's Tom Kasza, former Secret Service agent in the Presidential Protective Division for both Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.